Tanya is a foundational work of Chabad Hasidus. This is Lessons in Tanya, which is a commentary. Tanya, though, the basic Tanya, is written by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. He's also called the Alter Rebbe. He's the first Rebbe of Chabad Lubavitch. I'm going to read to you guys what is more of the reality of what's going on for Bnei Noach according to Chabad Hasidus, because the plain reading of Tanya isn't accurate. It's also what rabbis read, most Jews read. They don't usually read this, which is Lessons in Tanya. We're in Likutei Amarim, which is the first part of the Tanya, and we're in chapter 1 at the very end, and this is the Lessons in Tanya. You have your actual Tanya here in the Hebrew and in the English translation in the italics, but then you have the Lessons in Tanya, which is the commentary. I shouldn't say the commentary, but Lessons in Tanya is one of the commentaries. It's a popular commentary. I recommend everybody get it. Anyways, so this is how it should be read. When we're talking about non-Jewish and Jewish animal souls and non-Jewish animal souls. Everybody has an animal soul. It's the soul that's in the blood. If you remember the Tanakh, the Torah, talking about the nefesh is in the blood and things like this, this is what it's talking about. It's talking about the animal soul. When a Jew acts in a benevolent manner, he is motivated mainly out of concern for the welfare of his fellow. The proof of this is that were his fellow not to need his help, this would give him greater pleasure than the gratification derived from his act of kindness. So that's describing the Jewish animal soul. That Jewish animal soul is emanates from Klipa. It's called Klipas Nogah. It contains an element of goodness in it. Klipa is generally referred to as evil or impure, but Klipas Nogah has an element of goodness mixed in with that evil or impurity. And then it goes on to say, concerning the nations of the world, however, this is not so. So in the nations of the world here, it's actually, well, let me back up. In the Tanya, it says, it comments on the verse, the kindness of the nations. When it says the nations, it's referring to umot. That the kindness, the chesed shomot ha'olam, the kindness that the nations do, is only for their selves, the glorification. Now that says umot ha'olam, the peoples of the world. There's another group of people though called the Hasidei umot ha'olam, the pious peoples of the world. These are people. The Umot Ha'olam do not keep the 7, or if they do keep the 7, they do it for selfish reasons. The Hasidei Umot Ha'olam do it for selfless reasons because they are attached to Hashem. I'll talk about that a little bit more. And so it goes on further to say, this is why it talks about concerning the nations of the world, however, this is not so. Their motivation is not the welfare of their fellow. Rather, it stems from a self-serving motive, the desire for self-glorification, a feeling of gratification, and the like. So, even if a person seems to do good, like say they give tzedakah or something like that, what they're talking about here is if that person is doing it just to make themselves feel good in some way. The closest thing of that would seem to be kind, but is still part of this problem, would be something like Deism, which is actually, further on we'll talk about what the Sidurim Dach says, showing Shar Hag Hamatzot, and the Sidurim Dach, which is the commentary of the Siddur on by the Alter Rebbe, which is the same rabbi who wrote the Tanya. He basically describes deism. So even if somebody believes in God, they can still have selfish motives when they do acts of kindness. And the reasons why the farthest, the closest a person can do to kindness, but is still far away from actual selflessness, is when people are doing things even though they believe in God, but they don't believe God is effective in the world today. Deism believes that God created the world, but he's no longer present or a part of the normal of the creative actions in the world today. In other words, a human being in this belief system believes that they are actually the ones in power. God has given them over complete power and dominion in the world, rather than Hashem, who is now resting somewhere off in a faraway place or whatever. That is not the case, and that's the kind of Bnei Noach that this is describing. It's talking about Bnei Noach that do not have a proper understanding of Hashem. That's like what's called also the Ben Noach Stam, or what the Rambam describes as the Ben Noach who does the 7 even. He might do the 7, but he doesn't do them because the Torah and Hashem says so. Now let's talk about this third type of non-Jew, or the second type of non-Jew, this third type of person. It should be noted that among the nations, so among these Umot Ha'alam of the world, there are also to be found those whose souls are derived from Klipas Nogah. Now, the Klipas Nogah is still a Klipa, but it has a good essence trapped within it that is shining. It's not fully revealed yet. It has not been fully rescued. The godliness has not been fully rescued from this Klipa, but it's shining through. Called the pious of the ones of the nations of the world. So basically he's talking about the Hasidei Mohalam here. These are the Bnei Noach that do the 7 because the Torah and Hashem says so in his Torah. These righteous individuals are benevolent, not out of selfish motives, but out of a genuine concern for their fellow. So the Hasidei Mohalam, the soul, the animal soul, the Hasidei Mohalam emanate from this Klipas Nogah. It's the same place that the Jewish soul initially emanates from. So when a Jewish male is born, for instance, his soul is emanating from his animal soul is emanating from Klipas Nogah as well, except that when I shouldn't say that. I don't know that specifically, but it appears to me that that's the case. And it appears to me that when he starts to interact with the mitzvahs through his parents, through his mother, which is probably why the Jewish soul, the Jewish or the godly soul, is imparted to the child through his mother, is because on the 8th day, when he has a bris milah, when he begins to interact with the Torah directly, and he undergoes circumcision, he's removing this klipa, he's removing this impurity. So it appears to me that the Jewish soul also emanates from this Klipas Nogah as well. However, it's within the soul of the Jew that he will eventually get rid of this klipa, where the non-Jew doesn't necessarily have to get rid of this klipa. The non-Jew has 3 choices. Either he does nothing and he kind of twiddles his thumbs and just doesn't transgress the 7. The second thing is he feeds back into the klipa, which would be really bad. Or the third thing is that he or she could do is to remove this klipa. So you have the 7 mitzvot Bnei Noach, and then you have an 8th mitzvah, not you, but there is an 8th mitzvah in the Torah, which is what Avraham partook in, which was the removal of this klipa, which is the foreskin or the orla. That's what circumcision is about. A part of it is about, I should say, but most of it. It's the removal of this klipa, and that's the beginning of Gering, basically. And that's the end of chapter 1. It's talking about the animal soul. It sounds derogatory to talk about an animal soul, but it's really talking about the nefesh that is in the blood. All clean animals emanate from this Klipas Nogah. All the impure animals, all the unclean animals, emanate from the other 3 impure klipot. There are 4 major klipot. The 4th is called the Klipas Nogah. That's why it goes on in chapter 2 of the Tanya. It starts to talk about the Jewish soul, which is a godly soul. It's not, if you read the Hebrew there, it's not talking that, it doesn't necessarily say that only Israel has a godly soul. What it's talking about is that Israel has a godly soul, definitively. Whereas for a non-Jew, for somebody like Hasidei Mohalam, that person has to merit a godly soul on his or her own by removing of the Klipa and interacting with Hashem, and attaching him or herself to Hashem. Now you're probably asking yourself, why then do rabbis get this wrong? Why do they tell even Bnei Noach that are Hasidei Mohalam? Why do they tell them that they're actually not Hasidei Mohalam? Well, they don't directly say this, but they basically say you're not Hasidei Mohalam, you're the Umot Ha'alam. You're those selfish peoples, basically, the people of the world that do things for selfish motives. When, for a fact, at least pretty sure, because you know yourself well, or try to at least better than anybody else, that you trying not to be a selfish person, that you do believe you have some selfless traits. And not only that, but you're studying Torah, you have a connection with Hashem, and you do receive a portion of the world to come, and you're not like these souls that emanate from the completely impure Klipas. So I'm going to show you why I think it is that a lot of rabbis and Jews today believe that when it comes to Chabad Hasidus, and that's because we're gonna look in the regular Tanya. I should say regular. The Lessons in Tanya uses the regular Tanya text too, but it's not the commentary. Although it does have a little bit of commentary, but I'm going to show you why I think it's like that. So chapter 1 starts. Okay, here we go. Basically, it's the same thing that we read earlier, but without the Lessons in Tanya commentary, and that's kind of critical. So let's just start out here. For in the case of Israel, the soul of the Klipa is derived from the Klipas Nogah, which also contains good, as it originates in the esoteric tree of knowledge of good and evil. The souls of the nations of the world, however, so he's talking about the Umot Ha'alam here again. It's the same thing in the Tanya as it was from previously. It's the Lessons in Tanya commentary is gone. The souls of the nations of the world, however, emanate from the other unclean Klipa, which contain no good whatsoever. That all the good that the nations do is done for selfish motives. So the Gemara comments on the verse that the kindness of the nations is sin, that all charity and kindness done by the nations of the world is only for their self-glorification and so on. So when you read that without the Lessons in Tanya commentary, you can see why a lot of rabbis and a lot of Jews that learn Chabad Hasidus, who learn the Tanya, they think all non-Jews are selfish or evil in some way or whatever. Even though they're nice to you, they probably can't quite make sense of it themselves because they know something isn't quite right. But here it is. It's in the Tanya, and this is a foundational work for them, which you can see why they would get this wrong when it comes to the Hasidei Mohalam, which are people that keep the 7 because the Torah says so, because they have a connection to Hashem. It's actually strange because the reason why it's strange is because the Tanya here, which was written by the Alter Rebbe, he actually wrote another book. Well, he actually wrote many books, but yeah, he wrote his own commentary on the Siddur. This is where a lot of the ideas are received from the Lessons in Tanya concerning the Hasidei Mohalam here. This is the Siddur and Daf. This is the Alter Rebbe's commentary, which is the same author of the Tanya. The first Rebbe of Chabad, he writes and he talks about the Sephiros and how the lower 7 Sephirot are the Midot, and how you have to conquer them so that you don't give over to the Klipa, you don't give over to the Sitra Achra, to the other side, which is the side of unholiness. And rather you stop giving over to the side of unholiness, and how your soul can now contain an essence of goodness within it. So, in other words, what I'm saying is that don't think that the author of the Tanya meant that all non-Jews are evil or some such. The Tanya wasn't wrote for non-Jews initially. It was written for Jews, similar to the way the Shulchan Aruch is written for Jews. It's not written for non-Jews. It's not written for times outside of the Yovel year. Rather, you have works like the Mishnah Torah that is written for the Yovel year as well as the non-Yovel years, and it goes over in detail the Sheva Mitzvot for Bnei Noach and things like that, where the Shulchan Aruch does not. It's similar in context. It's just similar. So you have to study more Hasidus. It's highly unfortunate that a lot of rabbis don't know this. I know a lot of rabbis in my community that don't quite know how to deal with it. Maybe. Fortunately, my rabbi hinted some of these things to me, so I can do my own research on them. And yeah, but it's just unfortunate that some other rabbis aren't able to quite see that, and they don't know how to deal with it. So it's really up to us. It's really up to Bnei Noach who zero in on this stuff. It's really up to us. We have to have a sense of selflessness to go into these texts and do research ourselves and show a lot of these Chabadniks that it's actually not that way for some Bnei Noach, and try and give them a sense of the Geula, give them a sense of the redemption and what the complete redemption will be like when non-Jews and Jews are interacting with Torah. And hopefully Jews will realize that they're the sages of the world, and that there are going to be non-Jews coming to learn Torah and learn things like Hasidus, Chabad Hasidus, and that they need to be prepared for these kind of questions from Bnei Noach, who really do have some kind of attachment to Hashem, even though it's not a full-on 613 mitzvahs attachment to Hashem. They're still attaching to Hashem in some way, and it's really up to us to do that. I know it sounds crazy because we're thinking like, wow, I don't even know this stuff. But the truth is, if you start to learn on your own, you can accomplish this. And sometimes it's not even learning. Sometimes it's just doing acts of goodness and kindness to other people, to rabbis and things like that, who will hopefully be able to discern that you're not a selfish person, that you have an element of selflessness to you. And hopefully they'll work with you. But I just want to let you guys know all that stuff. So thank you for listening.